The Doyle Engaging Difference program, created in 2009 with a gift from Bill and Kathy Doyle, is a campus-wide collaboration designed to deepen the university's own commitment to tolerance and diversity and enhance global awareness of the challenges and opportunities of an era of increasing interconnectedness. The Doyle program is a joint effort of Georgetown College, the Berkley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, and the Center for New Designs in Learning and Scholarship. The Doyle program grew out of conversations Bill Doyle, a member of Georgetown's Board of Directors, had with President DeGioia, Dean of the College Chester Gillis, Tom Banchoff, and Randy Bass, Vice Provost, who will also join the conversation this afternoon, about the urgent need to prepare our students for the lives they will lead in an increasingly connected and diverse world. Through the Doyle program, we challenge students to examine their preconceptions and encourage them to engage with and learn to appreciate the differences in our human community, on campus, in our nation, and on a global scale. The Doyle program has two main foci. The first, run through Candles, provides resources for faculty to redesign courses to incorporate modules and themes of tolerance and diversity and explore the challenges of cultural, social, religious, racial, and other differences. This program targets faculty teaching first level and gateway courses most generally. The second set of projects is run through the Berkley Center, the Junior Year Abroad Network, and the Doyle Seminars program. In the past few years, the JYAN network has sent 350 students to 50 countries for study who engage in in-depth dialogue while they're in, with each other while they're in their study abroad locations. The Doyle seminars are intended to deepen student learning about diversity and difference by giving faculty the opportunity to enhance the research component of upper-level seminars. Among other projects, we convene this annual symposium, now our 5th annual symposium, on a range of topics about diversity and difference, so as to encourage how students and faculty can better navigate the many differences of religious, cultural, and values differences at Georgetown and globally. So now I'll turn it over to my colleague, John Rakestraw, who is the co-director of the Doyle program, who will talk about today's events and introduce the provost and the panelists. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. I just want to take a quick minute. We'd be remiss if we didn't thank the many people at the Berkley Center and at Candles and in the Provost's office who helped to pull this together. The list of names really is far too long for me to recite them now, but what I would like to invite you to do is to spend just a brief moment thinking about the people in your lives without whom you could not do the work that you do, and send your thanks to them. And thanks to those in the Berkley Center and the Provost's office and Candles who have helped us pull this together. As Michael indicated, the Doyle program is present in many different ways across the campus. We're in individual classes, we're working with faculty in groups, we're working with students as they travel abroad to think more deeply about their own experience. So we bring together small groups of students and faculty in a variety of settings. We also do a film and culture series where we watch a film or a cultural event and then discuss things together. Many of you have been in one or more of these Doyle settings. I see some of you who have been faculty fellows. Some of you are students who have been enrolled in Doyle classes, either the faculty fellows classes in the lower level classes or the upper level research seminars. Today's symposium is slightly different from those other events because instead of working with a small, somewhat narrowly defined constituency, we're inviting people from across the community to think about issues that are important to us, issues related to diversity as they come up in a wide variety of settings. Randy will talk in a few minutes about some of the ways in which we're hoping this community work today can be fed into an ongoing process, ongoing discussions about diversity in the curriculum and in the co-curriculum. And we'll have ample time to get to that conversation later in the workshop after some stage setting by Provost Bob Groves and Vice Provost Randy Bass. We will spend time together working on some of these issues, and that work is hinted at by these draft goals that you have before you today, and we'll be looking at those and some other things. So we will get to that conversation later, but first we have some stage setting from Vice Provost Randy Bass and Provost Bob Groves. I do feel a little bit odd introducing the provost to you because there are many here who know him much better than I do. I can only say that my occasional encounters with him have led me to see him as a man who thinks and a man who cares and a man who inspires those around him to think and to care. And those of you who know me well might also see him as a man who inspires some people to wear clothes they don't ordinarily wear. We appreciate very much your willingness to be with us this afternoon. Provost Bob Groves, thank you.
You know, until that note of humor at the end, it was sounding like a eulogy. I thought I had died already. You know? So it's really good to be with you today, mainly because I'm hoping you really provide a lot of input for some very important work we're doing. And I want to tell you the story that brings us here, I guess. And I'll start at 40,000 square feet, 40,000 feet. Is that what it is? Is that the metaphor? High, altitude. Thank you. The word people. I need the word people. Yeah, we always need the English department. So what are we about here at this campus up here? We think we're about training young people to become citizens in a world that's really diverse, and not just citizens, but leaders of that world. And all of us grew up in a particular environment. Some of those environments are pretty diverse on a lot of different dimensions. Others are really homogeneous. And what's I shouldn't say the easiest thing, but the easier part of that problem is to try to have an admissions process that brings to campus people with a lot of different backgrounds. Turns out that isn't very easy to begin with either, but you know, we're plugging away at it. But that isn't sufficient. It's really sufficient. What we need is a culture, an environment there that takes advantage of that diversity. So if the diversity ends up producing a mosaic where those who are like one another just hang out with one another, and all the conversation is within group, not between group, then you know this is a waste of our time. So all of us bring to this environment something, and the bumper sticker slogan works. The only thing we have in common is diversity. We're all part of this diverse environment. And we're trying to build that culture. So, I don't know, a few months ago, when was it? 3 months ago? A bunch of students pointed out to us that we have work to do on this. So those of you who don't tweet, you can go to Twitter and look for hashtag BBGU and BAGU and BLGU. Read those tweets. You didn't have to read very many of them to realize, geez, things are not as what we hope they should be. So we began to peck away at that with the guidance of student groups. And we have 3 groups formed. One that's working on kind of student affairs things, the student culture. What could we do about the peer culture that would make life better for all of us? And the life better for all of us is that we would all be viewed as multidimensional human beings. We wouldn't be defined as something that you can see about us or something that you know about us from our background, that we're all really kind of complex, but we also have differences. And those differences we need to find out about those. We need to know, each of us, how do we navigate those differences in a way that makes a better world? So the student affairs part is part of that, because there is a student culture issue that we need to talk about and act on. And then there's an alumni group, because one of the ideas that seems promising to me because I've seen it work before. Link up alumni with shared attributes to the students and just let them talk about how to navigate things and how to be the best person you can be in a diverse world. So we're working on that. And then finally, and this is relevant to this workshop, the academic side. So what in terms of structured academic experiences could help build this culture? It's a tricky problem because I used to be Census Bureau director, and the one thing I learned is one piece of trivia. I'll give this to you free. There are 175 languages spoken in the Los Angeles school system. There's an article in the New York Times that there were 400 languages spoken in New York City. Each of these languages has its own culture attached to it. Language and culture are pretty close. Now, they did note that some of these 400 languages are only spoken by one person, so I don't know what that actually means, whether they're talking to themselves or what. But it just points out that knowing about all cultures is a huge thing. But are there common features to cultures across the world and all the things attached to culture that are race and class and so on, that we could teach in a way that we'd produce a culture and a set of leaders for this diverse world that really will be leaders in an increasingly diverse world? So that's your task. So, if you could knock this off today and let me know what the answer is, I'd really appreciate it. It's not going to be easy to do it, really. This group, how academic campuses work. This group will inform the Doyle initiative. The Doyle initiative, to the extent that it impinges on classes, has to work through curricular committees and things like that. But if we don't start here, we're not starting. I mean, we got to start. And we're asking you to have some energy to start. And to the extent that you start with a bunch of energy, you'll keep the momentum going, and we'll make a better Georgetown out of this. But we need your energy now. So I thank you for being here. So I'd like to introduce Vice Provost Randy Bass, who was born at a very early age. And he has grown older. And he's now the Vice Provost.
I never thought that was a eulogy. Thank you, Provost Groves, for helping to frame the context for this and for helping to warm up this working session. And I'd like to now just make some contextualizing remarks to help kind of give us a sense of where we are going and what the task is before us. And then we'll hear from three people, I think, who've been asked to just say a few words and kind of get the conversation started. And then we're going to move into a part of the symposium that's really very active, where hopefully not as active as it was during the fire alarm from 3:45 to 4:01 that many of you probably missed, but active nonetheless. And we really do want to do work, as Bob said, on these learning goals and around these potential outcomes. From my perspective, the work that we're going to do today will directly help inform the work that we are doing on the academic working group that's part of the three groups that Bob talked about. And that working group is directly creating a proposal that will go to the core curriculum committee, which I co-chair, with the hopes that by the fall there will be a curriculum proposal around difference of some kind, diversity or difference, that'll go before MCEF. So this is the path to a curricular change that we see, and what we're working on today. This is where we are on the draft goals, and so this is really working directly on that. This is not just talk. Well, or at least until the proposal gets voted down. then that will backwardly render this just talk. No, that was just a joke.
A little academic humor.
Yeah, that's right. So, to frame what we want to do around the curriculum, and Bob, laid that out, that there's structural diversity, right? Just what is the environment like? How diverse is it? There's interactional diversity, like how do people actually interact, in what ways are they actually interacting, and if they're not interacting, you're not making a difference. And then there's the curricular role, the curriculum diversity. And that's the piece we're working on, but all these things really end up having to work together. So part of the challenge, I think, is thinking about what is it that curriculum can do? What can't it do? What is it the curriculum expresses? So I had two sort of epigraphs, or two quotations, very short quotations, that for me frame what we're doing here today. So one I took from the Santa Clara core curriculum site, right? Another fellow Jesuit university, in which they say, a university expresses its most basic values in its core curriculum. That part of an undergraduate education required of all students. Okay? So the university expresses its most basic values in the core curriculum. So that's one piece. What is it that a requirement that we might have, what is it expressing about our most basic values? And the second is very well known from Hans Peter Kolvenbach, who was the Superior General of the Jesuits, a Superior General ago. He said, the real measure of our Jesuit universities lies in who our students become. So anything that we do, anything that we start to imagine around what a curricular requirement ought to be, is embedded in the question of what is it that we want our students to become? What kind of difference do we think we're making to our students when they're here? What's happening to people that we're trying to move the needle on what? Between when people come in and when they go out. Okay? And the Doyle program, which is committed to focusing on engaging difference, that's why we called today Engaging Difference to Make a Difference. What kind of engagement of difference makes a difference to people from the beginning to when they leave? Now, the challenge there is that very often when people design courses, when faculty design courses, a subset of people, tend to really focus on knowledge. What am I teaching? What am I covering? And skills and abilities. Sometimes just knowledge, but sometimes also skills and abilities. When we talk about what it is, that's when people design courses. When we talk about what is it we want for our students, what kind of students are we trying to graduate, we often talk about things that are over here on this list, what we might call dispositions or values. We want people that are open, we want people that are empathetic, we want people that are resilient or curious, believe in the common good, can be reflective or moral. But we often don't think about those things when we're actually designing courses. But if we're trying to design a curricular requirement around difference, if we're trying to design a curricular requirement that expresses our most basic values about difference, we probably have to at least start equally with what it is we're trying to develop at this broadest level. We have to at least take the knowledge and skills and embed them in some notion of dispositions and values. And that's difficult, because people will often say, you can't teach people any of these things. Right? You can embed these in instruction. These you can cultivate, but you can't teach. These are things that come out of being in an environment, but they're not a matter of direct instruction. So to develop a core curriculum requirement that develops these kinds of things is not just a matter of content. It's not just a matter of very specific activities. It's a matter of creating an environment in which something happens. Okay? So one of the things we really want you to engage in today is to ask and help us figure out, from your diverse and collective perspectives, what are the components of a requirement that we would want to express our most basic values? What is the knowledge piece? Is it about that you have to learn something about power or privilege or histories of inequities? Some kind of conceptual framework by which you can understand difference? Is it about skills? Is it a particular kind of critical thinking? Or a particular set of literacies around communication? Or particular skills that are associated with empathy? Or are things on this list? Is it courage? Is it the ability to feel uncomfortable? I teach a course called The Future of the University as a Design Problem, in which our students design the Georgetown of 2033. And the number one thing that students always want to start with is they want to create a university designed around discomfort. That helps students take risks, move out of their comfort zone, and confront their, partially making the statement that Georgetown does the opposite. That their history of success in school does the opposite of that. So what is it that we would actually value? And if we're designing for this, what does that mean? And then there's the question of how. So is it just a course we're talking about? Is it a course plus experience? Could an experience cover this requirement? Whenever I ask students, where have you had your most powerful learning experiences? Or I've been doing these design labs with our alumni, and the first thing we do is we ask them to draw pictures of a formative experience they had at Georgetown. None of the alumni are drawing pictures of lecture halls. I haven't seen a picture of Rice 103 yet. But many of them are drawing tables and chairs. That's the seminar table in Otto Hence's office where they used to sit and talk, or the dining room table in some professor's home, or the table on the veranda of the villa in Turkey where they sat for endless hours with fellow students and a professor talking. Or it's downtown DC, or it's other kinds of things that took them outside the classroom. That's where people report their most intensive learning experiences are. So what is the how? What is the how that we want to create if we want to make a difference? Yes, the core curriculum requirement is symbolic, but we also want it to have impact. Since we're creating it now in 2014, what is the requirement that makes sense to create now in 2014 around difference? Given everything we know about effective learning, given everything we believe about the nature of difference in a globalized, complicated world. So that's my version of Bob's challenge. You guys figure that out and you let us know. That's what we're working on today. We want to be able to imagine a requirement that accomplishes what we want to accomplish, that somehow gives students an experience, not just inert knowledge, and that is somehow achievable. It doesn't have to be easily achievable. In fact, it should stretch us. The best core curriculum requirements should stretch the university to try to achieve it, but it has to be achievable. So that's the context of our work. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. We're first going to hear from three people and then to get a little bit of perspective in response to some of these ideas. But then we're going to get to work and hopefully re-oxygenate the room. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to John, who will bring the other perspectives in.
Okay, we know that each of you comes to this conversation with your own particular approach to this, your own perspective on it. At the risk of generalization, we've invited three people who represent different constituencies related to Georgetown. I want to be clear, they are not speaking for all in their constituency. Instead, we're asking them to speak as someone who graduated from Georgetown, or as someone who's a student, or as someone who's a faculty. I'd like to start with Lauren Reese, who graduated from Georgetown in 2012. Thanks very much for being with us tonight.
Everyone, thank you so much for having me. I have a unique connection to this, as one of my most formative experiences from Georgetown was my first week when I took part in Y Lead, Young Leaders in Education About Diversity. And that was, and there's a lot of Y leaders here who I know and some that I don't, who are present generations of it. And that kind of set the tone for how I approached my education at Georgetown. I came into Georgetown not knowing a damn thing about Jesuits or what I was getting myself into, and found that that identities become part of my own, and also part of the reason why I love Georgetown and really reinforce the kind of experience I had in Y Lead. And for those of you who don't know, it's basically Y Lead is like the real world of Georgetown. What happens when you get a bunch of different students coming into Georgetown with their different worldviews, you put them in a room and you make them talk about the stuff that makes them really uncomfortable. It really changed the way that I came into Georgetown, but also in a great way, but also it made it difficult because I came into an atmosphere where people weren't always as willing to talk about difficult subjects, weren't always equipped with the language or given the space or realized that there was value in being uncomfortable and asking questions and learning from them. So, and to give you a bit of backstory, I had this experience. I went on to serve as a coordinator for Y-Lead 1 year. I also took part in a different dialogue series while I was at Georgetown, which is another format in which we try to keep having these discussions. And I was also involved in the Student Commission for Unity and some of my iterations of diversity requirement discussions on campus. So it's exciting and also frustrating to see the discussions happening here again. And I just wanted to kind of reflect on some of the things that came up in our process of talking about how we make the academics of Georgetown really match with our ideals and what we want our alumni to come out of the institution with. So we had an academic working group and Student Commission for Unity where we did analysis of other universities who had a diversity requirement or cross-cultural communication and looked at what worked and how not only do you need to kind of identify what you want students to come out of it with, but you also need to make sure it's tailored to what's specific and what's unique about each university. So we kind of tried to provide as much data as possible to support our claims as students, and also in conjunction with faculty. And that was one of the greatest opportunities for me as a student, was being able to talk to faculty, have my voice be heard in those realms, and kind of one of my first experiences as a young idealist coming faced with an institution, and learning how you bring your ideas that start as a grassroots kind of movement and bring it to the institutional level. And I'm really glad to hear that some of my colleagues, my Georgetown students now took their action to the university in the form of social movements and social engagement, because unfortunately during my time there were instances of hate crimes on campus or a Hoya article that came out that kind of enraged some of the students. So it's really exciting to me to see that this dialogue is happening and I'm sure there's an underlying things that have happened that have led to this discussion, but for what it's worth, I'm really great to hear as a Justice and Peace Studies student and then a sociology student to see that social movement kind of moving it forward. But when, as students, we brought our concerns and our research to the university, I found where we got caught up was in the philosophical differences and what diversity means and what multiculturalism means for university. What are the implications that underlying assumptions behind these terms that might prevent us from being able to agree from the get-go and then also put these ideas into action. And also there's kind of a sense of, and I apologize to the administrators and to the faculty here, if there's a 4-year cycle for these students, where I'm guilty of myself of going abroad in my junior year and kind of losing that fervor of wanting to change the Georgetown community. So it's better for the people who come after me. So hopefully the work that I did then and hopefully coming back now is in its way pushing it forward and it's happening on its own in its own organic way. So some of our thoughts that we had when we were thinking about our diversity requirement and bringing it to the university and implementing it was not only how we make it part of our curriculum so that we are competitive with schools like Stanford or schools like Duke who already have something like this, but how do we really incorporate that into our Jesuit values? What more could you ask for an institution that really prides itself on critical thinking, on making yourself, equipping yourself with the knowledge and cultivating and understanding your privilege so that you can be a better man or a woman for others. And also with the social justice teachings that we have embedded in what Georgetown is. So some way where we wed what makes us, competitive, why we draw people here and equip them with the skills, but also recognizing that we're unique because we have that basis at Georgetown. some of the aspects of a diversity requirement, as we talked about, that we were apprehensive of was slapping the diversity or multicultural label onto existing classes that we have, because we do have amazing classes that could count towards that, but towards a specific requirement. But as I often saw in the same realm relating to cultural studies, we have an African American studies program, and you just slap that label onto any African history class and call it a day, and it really isn't speaking to the kind of dialogue and kind of experiential learning that you need to equip Georgetown students with the skills and abilities and the knowledge that we're talking about now as the integral parts of that. And so in lieu of that, I mean, and I'm sure these discussions are already going on, but just to add my voice to the room, it really does, in my experience, come down to committing to hire faculty who have a diverse viewpoint, who aren't pulling from the same canon when we talk about certain subjects, who are not, who have different worldviews and can apply their worldview to different courses of study. But the good thing about that as well is that we have a lot of these things already happening. And I think one of the biggest things that I came away from Georgetown with is the importance of not only the content of what you're learning, but the way that you're taught. The content is really important, the pedagogy of the classroom and of the kind of spaces we create. And we have a lot of that already happening at Georgetown in some of the programs I mentioned. I mean, the Justice and Peace Studies program was really formative for me in a kind of understanding how it's important to create an inclusive environment in a classroom in order for us to have that open dialogue. And even if you're not talking outright about difficult subjects, which might be difficult to figure out how to inject that into a STEM-related course sometimes. If you create a classroom in which you're willing to talk from experiences, when you're willing to see those around you as equal contributors into this classroom and knowledge, it really starts to speak to some of the power and privilege dynamics that we want to make sure our students can recognize and coming out of Georgetown with those skills. And I think it also, as the provost and vice provost said, takes getting creative. I mean, maybe a diversity requirement ties in the community-based learning requirement that some of our classes have, where you have to go out into the community and really reflect on that experience using the skills that you've learned in class, but also reflect on it personally. I think a lot of what goes into the diversity, when we talk about diversity engaging in different dialogue, is a part of self-reflection, which can make it uncomfortable. But I think something that we already have built into the Georgetown ethos. I mean, when I came to Georgetown, I was kind of apprehensive about the religion and philosophy requirement. And then by the end of it, I said anytime I had a free slot in my schedule, those were the classes that I was taking, not only because it was fascinating and there were great professors, but they were classes that also taught me to think critically about potentially difficult subjects. So we have that ethos already here, and I think it takes some creativity in relying on what we already have and the great faculty and students and administrators that we have to cultivate that. And we have the interest from the students. We have, unfortunately, some of the things that I hear from students who I've spoken to now is that, or who've graduated, that they don't feel like they ever really had ownership of Georgetown, that they were here and they didn't feel like it was a community that was necessarily made for them, that they're kind of always fighting against it. And not that adding a requirement could completely do away with that sentiment. It could certainly be a step in the right direction. I was asked how this translated to work life, which I suppose I'm still figuring out. But I mean, I really credit my experience as having difficult conversations and being forced to, or learning to appreciate, more fully appreciate the impact of having a diversity of voices in the room when tackling a problem, when understanding, when trying to find a solution. I mean, it's really critical. And if not only are we equipping students with world-class education. We want to make sure that they're effective communicators and problem solvers. And in today's day and age, you have to be able to do these things. And I think a diversity requirement would be a step in the right direction. So, not that presented any clear solutions, but it really makes me feel happy to call this my alma mater, because we have create spaces like this and are looking forward to seeing how we can make this a better place. So thank you so much.
Good evening, I'm James Olsen. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Candles and I also teach in the philosophy department here. And I just wanted to introduce a former student of mine who I actually first came across in Doha while he was on a study abroad, Seun Oyewole, who also is a member of the Georgetown Aspiring Minority Business Leader and Entrepreneurs here on campus. So with that, Seun.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Professor Olsen said, I am Seun Oyewole. I'm a senior in the School of Foreign Service here. This is my final few weeks here at Georgetown. It's a very exciting time for me, but also there are a lot of things that I learned from Georgetown, positive as well as negative. Being a part of, different organizations, specifically the Gamble, Georgetown's Aspiring Minority Business Leaders and Entrepreneurs, as well as the Black Student Alliance for 2 years, I did notice that there were certain things that we had to work on as an institution, as well as like a community of students. First and foremost, I felt like being in the School of Foreign Service, I take a range of different courses. What we're supposed to do is engage with different cultures, understand the different dialogues that are going out there. And I feel like I've maybe had 1 or 2 classes where the level of engagement in terms of cross-cultural interaction was at a high. And I think that's pretty sad, because this school prides itself in producing like world leaders, global leaders. And I feel like it kind of does a disservice to students if they're graduating here, becoming world leaders, and they can't necessarily understand the culture of another person that has a dissimilar background from themselves. So that's one issue that I did encounter. Another thing is that engagement at the social level. Georgetown has done a lot to bring different people from different backgrounds, but if you look at the campus, there are clusters of people, and not a lot of interaction between these different clusters and groups. I feel like there needs to be some sort of impetus for these groups to interact with one another, whether that's through grant opportunities for organizations to get more money, whether it's through events that are free to everyone to participate in and able to speak with other people. And then also providing different opportunities for diverse dialogue. So like a few weeks ago, we had Nas here. Never in my life did I ever think I'd see Nas at Georgetown. And I thought that was a great first step for things like that, because we definitely have students from all walks of life, whether that's from, prep school somewhere in New England or urban environment, and they have different interests, of course. We tend to have great speakers. I've enjoyed seeing Warren Buffett. I've enjoyed seeing Bill Clinton, U2, all these different people. But like, if you bring someone like Nas, you're touching a whole different community of people there. So they're no longer being not marginalized, but they're not being ignored. Now their interests are being sparked, and now you're going to have students come and engage with the university. So these were just 3 issues: just engagement in the classroom, engagement at the social level, and then providing different opportunities for diverse dialogue. And those are some things that I hope that Georgetown will be able to carry on in the near future. And as it goes with developing the whole person, being a Jesuit value, I believe that these are some things that we should focus on for us to move forward and continue to be an excellent institution as we are known to be. Thank you.
And finally, I'd like to introduce Sherry Linkon, who teaches in Georgetown's English department and is also the director of the college writing program. Did I get that right? University writing program. It means university, that's the sign language. Sherry.
So I've actually been at Georgetown probably less than most people in this room. I'm just finishing my 2nd year here. So to speak as a faculty member about these issues here is a little bit strange, and I just want to acknowledge that, but I also want to, like Lauren and, where did he go? Seun. I lost you. Oh, well. Oh, he's back there. That's why I can't see him. Okay. I want to start with a little bit of story so you have some sense of where I'm coming from. Before I came to Georgetown, I taught for 22 years at a university where I was very involved with diversity projects of various kinds. I taught courses in women's studies. I taught courses on diversity in American literature and culture. I was on the advisory board for African American Studies, and I was one of the founders of the Center for Working Class Studies. And one of the projects we did at the Center for Working Class Studies, along with a lot of work trying to engage people in the local community, trying to work with students, trying to think about the links to class across the wide range of other forms of culture and diversity and categories and whatever language you want to use, is design an interdisciplinary course to fulfill the diversity requirement at that university. So I led a team of 8 faculty who, between us, came from English, history, sociology, psychology, philosophy, religious studies, business and chemistry, and women's studies, Africana studies, American studies, and working class studies, so overlaps between there, where we spent 2 years working together to design a course that then became part of the curriculum. So much of what's up here and much of what we've been discussing is what we were talking about there. And out of that experience and all of those experiences, I come to all of this with a sense of sets of tensions, things that I think we ought to be kind of holding in not quite opposition to each other, but recognizing their relationship with each other. So the first, and I go back to what Randy was talking about, the notion of what do we want in this requirement, and how do we get there? So let's start with the what. Several tensions there. One is about recognizing the value of conversations that happen within groups, as well as the value of conversations that happen across groups. Now, one of the things we hear, we've heard it at Georgetown, I heard it at Youngstown State, there's a whole book about it called Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria, where the assumption is that if people are talking only with people who look like them, something's wrong. And I think we need to challenge that. There is a value to that conversation. It's a very important conversation in people's lives. It just shouldn't be the only conversation. And we need to recognize the space for both of those things. Similarly, we need to recognize places and create courses that examine both the common features of difference and inequality, the pieces of that affect you regardless of what your race, your class, your gender, your sexuality, etc. is. As I used to say to students in my courses, all of us have at least one race, at least one gender, at least one sexuality, etc., etc. We all have those. And yet there is also depth and richness and uniqueness in studying specific cultures. So how do we hold in tension the awareness of the commonality and the appreciation for the study in depth of something specific? The last one is the tension between complexity and coherence, and I'm looking at these goals and I don't know what they are yet. I suspect we're going to talk about them. But I love that none of them is short, and they're all multiple pieces. Anybody who knows me knows that's how I think. I think we need that complexity, and yet at the same time, if we're going to create a requirement, there ought to be some coherence to it. It need not be one set goal that everybody's going to achieve. It need not be one set way of fulfilling that goal. But there ought to be what we're having right now, which is the conversation, which helps us pull it together. So let me talk then about the how and the challenges that I see happening in the how. And the first is the tension, and Lauren gestured to it in talking about do we slap a D attribute onto a bunch of existing courses, or do we create something new? I think there's another way to think about that, which is the tension between an intervention and an addition. Are we adding a requirement? And I'm imagining what the conversations in the core curriculum committee will be like when we say that. Are we adding a requirement, or are we intervening in the education that we already have and integrating something that runs through those? Both of those are options, but how do we want to think about it? Addition or intervention? Is this a collaboration? A cross-disciplinary collaboration, something that happens where you get a lot of faculty and a lot of students and a lot of alumni and people in the community together to talk about it? Or does it have to happen in disciplinary spaces? And part of that is about a practical and strategic discussion. One of the things we learned in the faculty group that I led was that what we meant when we said diversity was very different if you asked it in the psychology department, and if you asked it in the School of Business, and if you asked it in, yes, the chemistry department. We all thought we were talking about the same thing, and we meant different things, which means we have to have those conversations both across disciplines and within disciplines. We have to have them in collaboration, and we have to have them inside ourselves, as faculty as well as students and everybody else. There's a question of scale versus intimacy, efficiency. How do we do something that we can actually manage to do? There are resources involved in this, and there's not an infinite number of resources. And the intimacy that is required in order to be able to talk seriously about these things. You can't address this in a large lecture course. And how do we make it manageable to create, how many undergraduates do we have? 7,000, something like that? However many we have, hundreds of small group conversations. So we've got to be thinking about that set of tensions. We are at a particular moment in this university where we are being challenged to think about creativity and innovation. And I want to think about those as options. I agree that some of the courses that have those that we might label things now, don't do the things we want them to do, but some of them do. And so we need to think about, where do we need to innovate, and where do we need to simply make use of what we're already doing? So that set of tensions. There's a tension, and one of my lessons arriving at Georgetown is about making change at Georgetown. My first job when I got here was to get the main campus executive faculty to pass a change in the core curriculum, which I'm told was the first time that had happened in like 30 years. And the thing that I was told over and over again is that this is a place where change is not easy. The tension between change and commitment. If we are going to make change at this university around diversity, we need a level of commitment to that I'm not sure we have yet. And I don't mean commitment by the administration or commitment by students. I mean commitment across all of those different groups. Change only comes from that commitment. And one of the first things we have to do, in some ways maybe even before we can envision what a requirement should look like, is think about how do we build that commitment so that we lay the foundation to be able to create change. And then the last piece for how is the tension between action and sustainability. I think it's true. I don't know for sure. Because at some point I was unable to continue to be the person who kept an eye on it, whether the course that my colleagues and I created 15 years ago still exists. We make changes and we take actions. You said it perfectly, it's a 4-year cycle. Keeping them going and keeping them alive and making it something so that 10 years from now we're not having this conversation again because we've made it a sustainable part of Georgetown culture is the last challenge we face. We have a lot of work to do.